Welcome to Stocking the Pantry with Hal, a series of articles, videos, and other ramblings to provide information and resources to help everyone to be better prepared, and hopefully have some fun along the way. Welcome to our virtual canning party here at the Point Defiance Ruston Senior Center. I'm Hal Meng, and we're about 2 or 3 days away from Thanksgiving. This time of year, I really like to dig into some of the history surrounding the foods that were traditionally connected with these holidays. Now, an interesting thing I ran across is the first Thanksgiving, or at least the harvest celebration that we call the first Thanksgiving, was in 1621. And we've had on various levels, celebrated that as a national event ever since then. But we never had a set date for it until 1945, or 42, excuse me, when it took an act of Congress to make it a set date. Prior to that, it would fluctuate anywhere from the third Thursday to even the first part of November. It was always at the discretion of the current president, and there were even a couple of times the presidents decided we weren't going to celebrate it. So finally that all stabilized. But one of the things that we have associated with Thanksgiving can come as a bit of a shock, but potatoes and corn and even bread were not associated with that first meal. Pretty much everything that is associated with various holiday festivals were things that were available at the time that it started. Now we can get pretty much anything we want. But in those first days, the menu was basically venison, squash, lobster, and clams, and probably some other berries and fruits. But no corn, no potatoes, and certainly not wheat bread. But as the holiday continued, some of those foods we now associate with it got worked into the holiday, and a lot of those came because they were inexpensive. So that even in the Great Depression, folks were able to afford potatoes and afford some bread. And so that's one of the reasons we have so many of that heavy carb loading around Thanksgiving. Well, chances are we're going to end up with some extra potatoes. So last session, we talked about freezing potatoes. This one, we're going to talk about dehydrating potatoes. Now, dehydrating, they'll actually keep just fine if they're properly stored, and they can be useful for a lot of different things. Now, a lot of folks don't want to invest in a dehydrator, and I can understand that. And there are ways to do some of this in an oven, but some of these, like the 5-tray dehydrator, are not that expensive. So today we're going to just dive right into talking about dehydrating potatoes. Now, freezing the potatoes and dehydrating them have a couple of similarities. One, the way that they do food preservation is by binding up the water so that bacteria can't grow. Obviously, in freezing, the water is bound into ice crystals. In dehydrating, the majority of the water is removed. So also, you can do the potatoes either as slices or shredded, just as like freezing them, but you can also do them by freezing mashed potatoes. But it's a little bit different, and the product's a little bit different. So we're going to come into now showing you how to dehydrate potato slices. So from my magic little tray here, I've already got this partially set up. So just like in freezing, the potatoes need to be partially cooked. In the case of slices, they're just blanched, so they still have some texture and flexibility, and they don't turn into mush. But you want to parboil them for 2 or 3 minutes until they're flexible and they start to move towards a semi-translucent appearance. When you put them on the tray, they've been cut about 1/4 inch thick, and you want to make sure there's a lot of air space around them. Now, I didn't cut up a whole bunch today, but you can put them about 1/4 inch apart if you wish. And then they go in to the dehydrator, and depending on what type of dehydrator you have, you can set it for 135 or 125. The instruction manuals that come with your dehydrator will tell you what would work a little better for the potatoes in that one, what temperature. But you usually leave them for about 8 to 10 hours. And when you check them, what you're looking for is for them to look pretty much like these in this jar. And they're crisp, they're translucent, and they break fairly easily, but they rehydrate really well. Now, when you store them, a lot of folks put in a silicate gel package. And what you want to get are ones that are cloth ones, or not cloth ones, paper ones, not cloth, because those can be easily regenerated after they've gotten their fill of water by microwaving for 2 minutes. So after you take them out of the dehydrator, you want to put them in a clear container and that you can seal, and watch them for the next couple of days. Because if you see moisture accumulating on the inside of that container, you need to take them out and redehydrate them a little bit, another few hours. Because any moisture that's in there during that, what they call the curing time, gets distributed evenly, but as long as it stays within them and you don't see it on the sides of the container, then you know that it's not going to have enough moisture to start spoiling. A lot of people like to put in these gel silica packets, and they work really well. For a container this big, I've put in about 3 of them. And once they have absorbed as much water as they can, you can regenerate them either by putting them in a dehydrator for an hour or 2 at 120 degrees, or by microwaving them for 2 minutes. And there's a lot more information on all of this stuff, including about the gel packs, in the article that's on our blog page. Now, how do you finally use these? Well, they have to be rehydrated. And you can do them rehydrating them outside of the recipe by putting them in a kettle or something with just enough boiling water to cover them and letting them sit for a while until they've absorbed as much water as they can. They're never going to be completely like these fresh slices of potato, even though they've been parboiled, but they'll be quite flexible, and they work very well in all different kinds of recipes. Now, a lot of the recipes that we've posted on our blog page connected to this article and video are from the Backpacking Chef, because not only are these good for emergency food and filling your pantry for events, but they're perfect for backpacking. So that site is one of the best ones for finding recipes online, and there are also several books that he has. In terms of recipes that we're giving you examples of, one is for au gratin potatoes, and it's a recipe for the dry sauce mix that goes with them. And then also there's one for scallop potatoes. All right, the second method, just like when we were freezing, is to take totally cooked mashed potatoes. When we were freezing them, we had to use oils, because if you don't, the mashed potatoes will have a grainy texture when they defrost. However, when you're dehydrating, you don't want to use any oils, because in the process of dehydrating, it stays warm enough, long enough, that the oils will start going rancid. So you just want to make these with a broth, vegetable, chicken, vegetarian, even just plain water. But I would suggest that you want to use a commercial broth if you're using a meat broth, because they will have gotten the vast majority of the oils and fats out of it. So what you do is take and peel the potatoes and boil them or blanch them enough that they become very, very soft. You want to then rinse them in cold water and put them into a blender or use a food processor, because you want to make them just very, very fine. And then when I started out today, it was several hours ago when I made these for the exhibit, you can actually pour them after you've added the proper amount of liquid and blended it in. However, there is so much starch in the potatoes that they started setting up. So it's really kind of like doing a sculpture with a really thick clay. But you want to spread it on one of these sheets. They come in different brands, but they're all Teflon. And nothing comes off of them because you don't heat it hot enough to run into any of the potential health drawbacks of Teflon. And it doesn't flake, and so it's not going to go into your food, but it makes it just incredibly easy to be able to pull off whatever you're working with. And so you spread it very thinly, about no more than a 1/4 inch, which will take quite a while to dry, but usually kind of shooting around a 1/16 of an inch. Once again, look for the instructions that come with your dehydrator on what temperature you want to use. So after you've spread it about a 1/4 or an 1/8 of an inch, you put it into the dehydrator and run it at the 125, 135 until it's pretty much set up. Now, I had an example, but in the process of transporting it over here, it came off of that nice sheet. So imagine, if you will, that it was still on this sheet, and the top part is pretty much dry. But if you lifted it up, you could see that it was still very wet. And because this is not allowing airflow, if you just leave it that way, it'll never quite dry. So there's a technique, forgive me, I'm asking you to use your imagination a lot, where you put another one of those sheets over the top, and then you put the tray on it, and you hold it carefully. It's what's called flipping it. And that wouldn't happen if it was dried. But you just turn it over. And at that point, even if it's only partially done, you'll be able to pull the sheet off and then put it back in the dehydrator and run it another 2 to 3 hours. All right, so thank you for joining us today. You're going to be able to use those barks in a number of different ways. And the difference between a leather and a bark is the leathers are only partially dehydrated. They still have a lot of flexibility. If you've had a fruit roll, that is a way of preserving fruits, making a snack or a treat that's pretty much shelf stable, but it also is more interesting for kids and adults because it's very chewy. On the other hand, you can make a whole bunch of different kinds of barks. For example, this is a pureed corn bark, which you can add to soups and stews. It's one of the few barks that are actually tasty. It tastes an awful lot like just a corn chip, but without any oils or added salts. This is tomato and onion, which works as a really nice seasoning. And you can tell that barks are really brittle. You can puree it, turn it into a powder, add it to any soup, So it's perfect for including with things that you take in ready-to-eat meals for backpacking. And then, of course, we have the pieces of our potato bark, which are also very good. So we're going to be including some recipes on barbecue-flavored potato bark, and then also a recipe for mashed potatoes made out of these with meat and vegetables. And we'll give you two alternatives on that. You can use freeze-dried or home-dried vegetables, but always use freeze-dried commercial meat products when you're going to be making camping things. So thank you very much for joining us today for another virtual canning party, and I wish you all a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you for spending some time with us as we explore preserving food at home. If you'd like more information about the Center for Food Preservation Arts, visit our website at preservefoods.blogspot.com. You can also find more videos on our YouTube channel, and please like us on Facebook. There are links at the end of this video, but also in the comments section. So please join us in our next virtual canning party as we continue stocking the pantry.